Hello, friends. This is Professor Guglov. On my channel, you mostly watch videos about the beautiful world around us. But today, it's a little different. What is it about? Keep watching to find out. Greek fire. An even more ancient yet remarkably effective weapon for its time was the so-called Greek fire. Greek fire emerged around 672 AD and was used to set enemy ships ablaze. It may have been the first flamethrower in history. Researchers believed that the flames could ignite upon contact with water, made possible by a mixture of raw oil, sulfur, and oil. The exact composition remains a mystery, but there are numerous theories. Some suggest that the main ingredient was oil with the addition of sulfur or pine resin. How the mixture was ignited is also unknown. Unquenched lime might have been helpful. Once ignited, Greek fire was incredibly difficult to extinguish. Water was useless. Only sand and possibly vinegar could smother the flames. Historical records indicate that Greek fire would adhere to any surface it touched. However, the secret of its effectiveness lies not only in its composition, which still worked even without certain ingredients, but also in how it was loaded. According to one theory, the mixture was placed in a siphon, which was then positioned at the front of a ship. Very little data has survived to provide a definitive answer. Moreover, the weapon's secret was carefully guarded, making Greek fire even more terrifying. It is said that this mysterious weapon created a lot of noise and smoke and was so effective that enemies immediately fled. And we can understand why. To encounter a flamethrower in the 7th century AD with no means to extinguish the fire, that was terrifying. Hellburners. And since we're talking about fire, we must mention a weapon known as the Hellburners, or also referred to as infernal machines. No one had heard of this weapon until the siege of the city of Antwerp in 1585. It was then that Italian engineer Federico Giambelli created floating bombs, a new weapon that astounded all of Europe. The bombs were ships filled with gunpowder. They mainly used small vessels with a displacement of around 70 tons. The ship was filled with highly flammable gunpowder weighing approximately 450 kilograms, surrounded by various destructive materials such as stones, iron hooks, metal, and even old tombstones. They took everything heavy to maximize the damage. The deadly payload was covered with a simple wooden deck and released into the water disguised as ordinary ships to avoid suspicion from the enemy. The currents simply carried the vessels toward the target to be destroyed, and then the fuse did its job. It was not just an explosion but an extremely powerful one, reportedly heard within an 80 kilometers radius. Historians describe the ground shaking as if a volcano had erupted. For a moment, the brightest flash illuminated the scene, followed by pitch darkness. Houses were demolished for many kilometers, and no living being could even stand on its feet. Stones, granite, and metal fragments scattered through the air. At that time, it was the most powerful man-made explosion in history. Anti-transport spikes. Let's talk about something less dangerous, like anti-transport spikes. These are small spikes used to stop a vehicle by puncturing its tires. Surprisingly, they appeared long before the invention of the first automobiles. It is known that similar spikes were used in the Battle of Carrhae in 53 BCE. Ancient Romans are likely to have invented them. The construction is extremely simple. They consist of two sharp bent metal spikes fastened in a way that one edge is always pointing upwards. That's it. These spikes were used as a method of passive defense to slow down the advancement of troops. They worked particularly well against horses, chariots, elephants, and camels. In fact, they were the perfect passive weapon, cheap, easy to transport, and requiring no special knowledge. Moreover, the spikes could be used multiple times. They were not like a pit with stakes that needed to be dug in a specific location and camouflaged. The spikes are not lethal, but encountering them is quite unpleasant, which is enough to undermine the enemy's morale. Injuries caused by spikes to horses and comrades made infantry move clumsily and slowly. The wounds greatly reduced mobility and took a long time to heal. And let's not forget about infections, which were difficult to treat in 53 BCE. Grenades. Now let's talk about ancient millennium-old hand grenades. We have some interesting information for you. Recently, scientists examined a ceramic vessel from Jerusalem dating back to the 12th century and discovered certain chemical residues on it. These chemicals had explosive properties. Most likely, The vessel was something like a medieval hand grenade thrown by Saladin's forces during the siege of Jerusalem in 1187. In fact, spherical and conical ceramic vessels dating from the 9th to 15th centuries are often found in the Middle East, but researchers are not entirely sure about their purpose. Some say they contained mercury, while others insist they were vessels for beer or aromatic oils. However, the analysis of the vessels increasingly indicates that they could have contained a flammable mixture, possibly used as an explosive. So it is possible that they were grenades from the time of the Crusades. A clay pot could very well be a grenade. A modern grenade, such as the Mk2, is filled with explosive material that creates high pressure and ruptures the grenade's metal casing. The casing walls scatter into small fragments. Of course, the mixture inside a clay grenade couldn't create the same powerful pressure, but that wasn't necessary since clay is much more fragile. There were enough available chemicals at that time for the clay fragments to scatter in different directions with great speed and cause damage to the enemy. Additionally, the ancient grenade had an incendiary effect. The vessels that potentially served as grenades had thick, ornament-free walls, and their shape was perfectly suited for creating the necessary pressure and explosion. In short, people at that time knew how to fight. Aztec whistles. Sometimes even scientists can't believe how inventive people of the past were. 10 years ago, archaeologists found strange skull-shaped objects in an Aztec temple in Mexico. Scientists initially thought they were toys or decorations. Who knows what the Aztecs liked to do in their free time? The findings were recorded and stored somewhere. However, years later, specialists discovered that these were not just trinkets, but special whistles that produced piercing and intimidating sounds. Ancient Aztecs could have used them during sacrificial ceremonies or in battles to intimidate their enemies. How does it intimidate, you ask? You need to hear it to understand. Let's play it. Now imagine the sound of hundreds of such whistles, all sounding in unison on the battlefield. It not only confuses but sends shivers down your spine. The whistles were presumably created to ward off evil spirits. In fact, there were many tools used for psychological warfare in the past. Such weapons both frightened and caused harm. Dragon-headed rocket launcher. The next unusual weapon is one of the world's first multi-stage ballistic rockets designed to target enemy ships in naval battles. Even if the enemy was out of reach, the weapon had a backup plan, a magazine of 3 rocket arrows. And if the battle took place on land instead of sea, no problem. Imagine you're in the midst of a battle against an enemy armed with classical weapons like swords and spears. And then you suddenly see a rocket with a dragon head on it. It's frightening. By the way, this weapon appeared in the movie, Mulan, Disney Mulan movie. The characters in the film used a similar weapon, albeit smaller. Ribaudican. And finally, we will tell you about a weapon that we simply can't miss. It's the Ribaudican. The artillery weapon Ribaudican is something like several small caliber cannons mounted parallel on a platform. It may seem like a strange idea because you can't just tie several cannons together and create a deadly weapon. However, when all these cannons simultaneously fired projectiles, it provided a higher rate of fire. Moreover, the weapon was light and mobile, unlike conventional cannons that were difficult to transport and hit moving targets. One shot from the Ribaudican released several iron projectiles, hitting everything in their path. Essentially, it was almost like a machine gun, but with a different orientation. The first known Ribaudican was used in 1339, and at some point, the number of cannons reached 50. Later, people figured out how machine guns should work, and the Ribaudican became part of history. Friends, don't hesitate to write comments under the video about what else you would like to learn. I will definitely fulfill your wish. Bye for now.